I'm here.
Yeah. Great seeing you.
Thank
Are you ready to start? I'm really interested to hear this about busting myths about testing. That's really intriguing to me. And I read up a little bit about you and board gaming, drumming, sewing. I'm only a drummer in my dreams, but I do some sewing and board gaming, so I feel a bit kindred spirits. And I do love getting my world view shaken. So please, bust the myths about testing for us.
Yes, I will share my screen here and let me know how that works out.
Oh, I need to set you as a presenter, making you a host temporarily. There you go. Now you should be able to share your screen.
Great stuff. All right. Can you see my blue screen here now?
We do, yes.
Great. So I'm Jos. I have been a tester since 2013. I live in Malmö, Sweden. I have got some help from my friend Lucas with the designs of these slides. And if you have any questions or want to connect, you have my contacts over there. Let me just find there. Okay. So I have learned that there is a lot of ideas about testing that I as a tester don't necessarily believe in, but which still are viewed as somewhat as true or close to true by many others. And if you look at the internet, it's full of these statements as well as attempts to challenge them. And this talk will be my attempt to do so. To get a somewhat accurate insight about these myths, I created a poll with some common opinions about testing that I have come across over the years. I asked for replies in a general Slack channel where more than 200 software professionals in all kinds of roles are present. So based on the responses here, I picked the 5 with the most votes. The question goes, if you think about your recent projects, teams, and work experience, have you felt that anything in the list below is true or close to true when it comes to testing? So let us start with the statement of these that got the least votes. Myth number 5. For a tester to be able to test, a developer needs to have constructed some code first. 15% of the responses stated that this is true or close to true. And there are many reasons for why this assumption is dangerous. It claims that testing should be started first after the solution is concluded. It states that testing is an activity dependent on code to be executed. The risk within this approach is that the feedback loops are getting extended. The feedback originating from any test activity would be delayed. And the more the feedback is delayed, the more problematic the raised concerns usually are to address. But then, if we start from the beginning here, testing, what is testing? There are many different views on what testing is and what testing could or should be. Some of them mix up testing as a craft with checking as an activity. Pure validation of that what is stated in the code also does what it states. I align my view with the rapid software testing definition by James Bach and Michael Bolton. Testing is the process of evaluating a product by learning about it through experiencing, exploring, and experimenting, which includes to some degree questioning, study, modeling, observation, inference, etc. In the software development context, we usually speak about a product as an application that is made up of code. The code snippets are often constructed as solution to specific problems. Those problems have hopefully been visualized, investigated, and discussed to some degree before any codes get written. Maybe by making whiteboard drawings, or by looking how others have done, by talking to a colleague, or just by consulting your own experience and assumptions. And to test the idea, the proposed solution is easily accomplished with a proper mindset. As a tester, I can explore and question assumptions while pointing to pre-studied behavior of the areas affected in the system. That provides valuable insights when the idea for a solution is brought up to light. Some of these questions require domain knowledge, and that is something a tester tends to have plenty of. As a tester in a product team, you tend to be everywhere. You know a lot about the most, but not necessarily most about a lot, spinning from the technical, business, and user contexts of the application. And this is a position that fits perfectly for raising concerns and pointing out behaviors and unknowns, things that might not be taken into consideration by the one coming up with the idea, or known by the one set to construct the outcome. Simply by asking how certain problems will be addressed within the thought solution, there is already time and effort saved compared with discovering those unaddressed edge cases after the code already exists. And Janet Gregory, an agile coach and a co-author of the flagship Agile Testing, states, testing and coding shouldn't be separated as standalone activities. They are part of the same development process. Code is not complete without testing, at least some kind of testing, although some testing activities can be completed without writing any code. So, why aren't everything doing this evolving testing from the start? I don't have an answer to that, but I do know that one part of testing is to look for potential problems and raise concerns for anything that risks introducing problems. A tester typically knows how to get around across the system and what happens in the actual flows, from front end through back end. That is also why a tester's input can save so much time if it's received in the project discovery phase, before the test subject exists as part of the code base. And another very good reason why testers should be involved from the start is to get rid of the handovers. If you, tester, designer, and developer together are part of constructing the solution, then you both naturally are involved until it's done. You discuss and you solve upcoming issues as they appear. You put the unknowns in the open and deal with them quickly. You work as a team, and by doing that, you share all the knowledge up front. Again, let's borrow Janet Gregory's experience for why it's a good approach to shift the tester's focus from detecting existing bugs to help preventing those issues to happen. When we think about the problem we are trying to solve and deal with those risks early to build the right thing, often we find the testing to find the bugs after the product is built become less painful. When the team works together with a shared understanding of what product they are building and what the level of quality should be, then most bugs can be prevented. And one approach for doing this is the three amigos. The term was first used in this context by George Dinwiddie in 2009. The idea is that the different skill sets involved in solving the problem from start to done meet to discuss and conclude the problems, the risks, and the thought solutions. In the initial idea, this typically involves a product owner, a developer, and a tester. But whatever it's called, it's not important. And maybe a designer or a data analyst or a DevOps engineer makes more sense to bring in some discussions. The key here is that you start doing it, bringing the tester mindset to the table as soon as the solution to the problem starts to be discussed. and that you come up with a practice that fits your team's needs and processes. So I like to conclude this myth as busted. Test activities can and should preferably start before any code is written. Let's move on to the next myth. Myth number 4, testing is a bottleneck. The later a bug or any potential issue is found, the higher the risk to fix it are involved. Finding issues late usually has a bad influence on stress, on time, and in the worst case, the code quality. Finding issues late costs more money. And here are 2 quotes on that subject from the author of Code Complete, Steve McConnell. Dozens of companies have found that simply focusing on correcting defects earlier rather than later in a project can cut development costs and schedules by factors of 2 or more. Researchers at HP, IBM, Hughes Aircraft, TRV, and other organizations have found that purging an error by the beginning of construction allow rework to be done 10 to 100 times less expensively than when it's done in the last part of the process during system test or after release. The later the test activities are introduced, the more time it usually takes to fix any issue revealed by their feedback. Switching context steals time. If the one who coded the solution is handing over the code to a tester without having any idea when the tester would start working on their code, they naturally would switch focus. And sometimes they even consider themselves as done. When feedback gained from the test activities is concluded to be an issue with the code, the implementer then has to switch the focus again to get in the context of where the fix is needed. The bad circle has started, and bad test processes can build up bottlenecks if testing is handled as a hand offshore, executed only after the code is considered done. The final confirmation, the last step in the implementation cycle, should be treated as just that. That happens after any other testing activity already have been carried out, when a final verification is the only thing left. This last step risks to be a bottleneck only when the other test activities haven't been prioritized in time. If you belong to a team where testing is regarded as a given part of the development, then nothing should be considered done until all test activities are. The sooner the testers are involved, the less severity is connected to this final step. And if the actual testing, the exploration, is carried out throughout the whole process, from discovery to delivery and release, and the state of the test subject is continuously fed back and that being acted upon, the last step isn't as heavy on time and effort and can be shared across the team. When sharing the checking activities, the team gains beneficial knowledge of the application and its state. So if you are in a team where testing is considered to be a bottleneck, there are some things you can do. First, we need to answer the most important question. Are test activities important? Why? For whom is it important? I believe most would answer yes, it is important. And I believe that is because many tend to align testing with quality. And quality is, as far as I have noted, considered an important characteristic of the software we like to be part of building. In my experience, it is important for everyone in the development team. The reason can be that the lack of testing can give more unpleasant and too late surprises, often around the same time that users are presented to the product. When this is concluded, you can make an inventory. What test activities are carried out when in the development cycle and by whom using what kind of tools. Then there are some things you can ask your team. What do we as a team think that testing means? What do we think it should mean? and who is and should be part of executing the test activities, and when and in what ways. How can we involve test activities earlier in our process? How can we commit to a definition of done that aligns with our test strategy? How can the team help speed up testing by constructing tools as well as getting repetitive tasks not demanding a certain mindset automated and help perform them? Not all will find what we want and what we have sums up nicely. But if you do this exercise and repeat it after some time, I'm positive that you will identify how to better prevent the problems you have with testing or lack of testing. So testing is not a bottleneck, but the lack of processes where testing is considered a continuous part risk introducing bottlenecks later. Let's head over to the next myth. Almost a third of the replies stated that this is true or close to true. If we bring what we already addressed, there is a pattern. If testing is started too late, treated as a separate handoff station last in line, any issues found with the help of test activities would be found late. As we move towards continuous integration and delivery and deployment, releases tend to get less scheduled, which one could imagine would mean less risk of releases being delayed. But according to GitLab's DevSecOps survey 2021 as well as 2020, most answered that testing was the most likely reason for a release to be delayed. GitLab states two of the reasons as not enough testing and testing too late in the process. As already stated, not prioritizing the test activities at the right time or at all delays the feedback of what those activities reveal. But even if the testing is started as early as possible and done as an integrated part throughout all the phases, there are certain things that might not only be possible to test late. Specific devices demanding specific setups could be one such thing. Data only available in a specific environment, another. Good testability is crucial to get the desired test activities even possible to execute in time. And I like to illustrate that with a quote from the testing guru, Michael Bolton. When testing is harder or slower, bugs have more time and more opportunity to stay hidden. The hidden bugs are harder to find than any bugs we've found so far. Otherwise, we would have found them already. Those bugs, deeper, less obvious, more subtle, more intermittent, may be far worse than any bugs we found so far. To make testing as fast and as easy as possible, that is the concept of testability. So if we return to the original statement that test activities delay the releases, I like to ask 3 questions. Do you consider bugs a test activity? Do you consider fixing a bug a test activity? Do you consider lack of testing a test activity? I would answer no to these questions. Identifying potential issues, however, and bringing that feedback back to the team is something that I consider a test activity. To verify a fix of a bug in the context where it appeared is another thing I see as a test activity. And I do consider it a needed test activity to point out problems that hinder other needed test activities to be carried out in the right time. But to enable these activities to actually happen is something I consider part of the team processes. And now I like to argue that it's not the test activities that delay the release. It is the actual state of which the code is in and any too late feedback reflections of that risk delaying the release. Being mindful of the GitHub survey answers, it seems that the lack of feedback in time due to missing test activities can be considered as the major reason for delay. But then again, some product teams have the regression checks that should be run and passed before any releases go. This can be fully automated. This can also be done by a human with a brain using a mobile device with a touchscreen on a not so good internet connection, just as the user would do. This can take time. This is often done with help from written steps and expected outcomes, automated or not. That is typically how you know it is a regression. By going through the same flow, you note if something is no longer functioning the same predicted way. And to follow any given steps doesn't demand any particular skill. Anyone in the development team can do just that. To automate those of the checks that make sense from the tester script is another thing many members of the development team can help doing. If you see a release as a team effort, the same should go for the regression checks. The more hands that help, the quicker it goes. And another gain of sharing the regression check activities is that everyone gets a good understanding of the application's actual state in the context of the user. Now we have 5 things to consider that could be helpful getting the test activities in better alignment with releasing. There is only one shared done. Nothing is done until it is all done. Address testability issues. Start testing when the idea is addressed and throughout implementation. Continuously give and respond to test activities feedback. Make regression check activities a team effort. So even if I do agree the test activities, feeding back the actual state of the product can delay releases given that the product state is not what we want to release. I see that as a symptom rather than the actual cause. And I would argue that it's rather the lack of testing activities in the right time that can risk causing delays. It brings the feedback too late. Now, it's time for the second most voted statement. Testing are gatekeepers. More than 1/3 of the responses stated that this is true or close to true. If you have a team where the persons executing the test activities are considered as gatekeepers or are considering themselves as gatekeepers, I think there are several problems at play. One thing that can be forgotten is that a gate tends to work in 2 directions, to let something in or to let something out. Let's name our gate done. If one team member is left on one side while the other all pass to the other side, there are suddenly a we and a them created. The ones that are done and the one that isn't. I have played that gatekeeper role. The stakeholders turned to me asking if the releases were ready to go out. This was in a project set up where we had set dates for the code freezes and for the releases. Often the code freeze got delayed. Almost always the release got delayed. It was pretty common that we got the last release candidate with the needed fixes some hours before the deadline. They, the rest of the team, asked me if it was okay. Everyone just wanted to get it out. I usually said that I needed some time and felt bad that I kept them all waiting. In some mix of anxiety, stress, panic, and bug hunting happiness, I spent those hours going through the release. And if all seemed okay, I mumbled that no blocking issues were found, and that was the go signal. Sometimes, of course, severe issues were first noticed after release. Hot fixes were produced, and one certain tester was spending their nights testing that release candidate, doing all in her power not to repeat the feeling of failing her team and stakeholders once again. Damn you if you do say go and major issues later are discovered. And damn you if you don't say go and we miss the deadline while you sit here and call wolf. As I grew more and more into my tester role, I also insisted on more communication with the developers. The issue tracking system ping pong days were silenced, and if I found an issue, I didn't directly yell release blocker to cover my own back. Instead, I talked with the developers and we discussed the severity and how we could best collaborate. This by helping each other to fix the issue and get the release in a state we felt comfortable with in a somewhat timely manner. We opened and closed the gate together, being on the same side. We provided the information we thought the stakeholders needed to make the decisions that was theirs to take. And as soon as we started to communicate, we had defeated the most crucial risk to delay any release. We sorted out any misunderstandings instead of throwing the hot stones in each other's knees. We were from then on acting as a team, sharing the burden of delays as well as the victories of releases. We surely gained both speed and stress reduction from that approach, and we also had fun while doing it. With all this being shared, I want to emphasize that it's probably a team problem if a tester in the team is expected or is expecting to act as a gatekeeper. As a member of a team facing that struggle, you can always chip in to question and show alternative ways of how to handle the release gate as a team. And as testers, we need to stop tyrannically controlling the gate to enable others to get the chance to help us. I'd like to share some suggestions from Michael Bolton regarding how a tester could gain respect from other team members. I also find this to fit as tips for how a tester can avoid getting in the gatekeeper position. Be a service to the project, not an obstacle. You're a provider of information, not a process enforcer. Recognize that your role is to think critically, to help to prevent programmers and managers from being fooled. And that starts with not being fooled yourself. You're often the bearer of bad news. Recognize that and deliver it with compassion and humility. So, what is the conclusion? Testers can act as gatekeepers, but not without the rest of the team encourage or allowing them to do so. And now it's time for the final myth. A tester's job is to assure quality. More than half of the responses state that this is true or close to true. There are plenty of good words written on this subject, given that we replace the is with is not. Let's start with breaking this up. Quality. What is quality? What does quality mean for a data scientist, for a scrum master, for a product manager, for their boss, or for a designer? Who defines what quality is for you, in your team, in your product, in the product context, for your users? Let's look at some definitions. Quality. The standard of something as measured against other things of a similar kind. The degree of excellence of something. Quality, a high standard. Quality is value to some person. Quality consists of the capacity to satisfy wants. Let's try to agree that quality in the context of software is a characteristic of that software that is valued by someone and satisfies someone's needs. Often that someone is the product manager or the stakeholders. Sometimes it's the users. If we, in the product team, agree upon what these values are and which needs we will do our best to satisfy, we have a vision. If it was within the tester to assure that these values were met and the wants satisfied within the creation of this product, from the idea to the application itself, I would believe that software development team would consist only of testers. Or, as Michael Bolton puts it, speaking about the reason why he doesn't think that quality assurance is a humble title for a tester. Because we don't create the product, design it, code it, or fix it if it has problems. Let's honor those who do that and don't make the overreaching claim that we assure the quality of their work. But then again, you could argue that the idea of assuring quality here lies within making sure that the agreed commitment is done. And yes, some part of that is what testing can be, but in the form of communicating this back to the one that are able to make a change or to fix it, simply put. A tester offers the extra pair of eyes, not yet home blind by code or user statistics. A tester can help construct the ID for the solution, but not build the actual solution. A tester explores, questions, investigates, documents, uses, misuses, overuses the things that others construct, such as IDs or designs or codes. So given that we have a shared value, a want and a shared want on a higher level, but when it comes to the smaller parts, the tiny iterations of something aiming to build up being the imagined product, we do not always know. Like any human, all of us in the development team are biased. We have the best intentions, but we probably aren't sharing the same values or wants. Here we need to compare and discuss our different desires and expectations and possible outcomes based on what we already know, but also what we don't know yet. The development team often has a good chance of drawing satisfying conclusions if they use their combined experiences of the product, the users, and the system context. But if we have an agreement on what quality is, then the tester should be able to assure that the end product mirrors that, right? I will borrow the testing guru James Bach's words here. Testers do not create, assure, ensure, or ensure quality. We do not in any deep sense prove that a product works. The direct intent of testing, what occupies our minds and lies at least somewhat within our power, is to discover the truth about the product. Since the tester can tell about the experience, we can only assure that our intention is to tell what we learned and that we learned what we tell. If we think that something is at risk, we would raise our concern and provide a conclusion leading us to that assumption. We might be wrong, we could be right, but we need others to do something about it. This talk is now leading to its end, and even if this is old news for many of you, that doesn't mean that it isn't worth repeating. Jonas Söderberg, a coach within neurocommunication, states that changing a habit demands at least 16 repetitions. Bear that in mind. You might need to remind yourself and your team members again and again. Quality is nothing a tester can assure. And if you, as a part of a product team, think that accomplishing what's valuable for the product manager, team members, and users also is valuable for you, then you aim for quality. If you aim for quality, you have a responsibility to fulfill this commitment to your best intentions. And this goes all the way through the other side of the dung gate. You have a team that can help you. You can do your best to help enable what you have agreed upon and question what you think could risk interfering with that agreement, feeding back as fast as you can. And one of the many experienced software professionals that argue why quality is a team responsibility is Janet Gregory. The highest performing teams and organizations that I have worked with have taken a holistic point of view to the quality of their product and understand how testing can support that vision. So let's settle with this. A tester cannot assure quality other than in the intention of the work the tester commits to execute. 5 statements are now gone through, and let's see where we landed. A tester's job is to test. Testers can only act as gatekeepers as long as the rest of the team encourage them to do so. The lack of test activities in the right time brings the needed feedback too late. The lack of processes where testing is considered a continuously part risk to introduce bottlenecks later. Test activities can and should start before any code is written, when the initial idea is brought to the team. That was all for me. Thank you so much, and please let me know if you have any question. I believe I might have drawn over time a bit here.
No problem. Thank you very much, Jos. It was rarely I've seen so many myths so elegantly busted, with a lot of help of good quotes to bring with us. Really insightful. Thank you very much. Although I think it is a little bit depressing that these myths prevail and still do to this extent. So that's why it's even more important to discuss them and make sure they get busted and everybody understands the problems with these myths prevailing. I got curious on one thing. You were mentioning this test activity inventory. I thought it was a really good idea. I haven't done that myself. I've done it to a very small extent sometimes, but only in specific regards on what types of performance risks do you have, how do we mitigate them, or whatever. Do you have any examples you could share with us about test activities that you would find in an inventory like that?
I've done it with my current team, and the kind of the outcome or the key takeaway from that is basically that, or at least I see it as, you gain two things. You make the testing activities more visible so that everyone can better understand maybe what's going on and why it's important and why they are important. So you present the activities and also why you are doing them and why you think they are important. And in that sense, you kind of share some knowledge with the team. You get a better understanding of why you are doing certain things. But then the team is also able to kind of get a better understanding of why it is important to start with it early instead of later and so forth. And another experience I have when doing those inventories is that if you come back to them and do them later, then you can also follow up a bit on where you progressed and what you might still struggle with and so forth.
Yes.
So that is why I think it's important to have them kind of now and then.
I need to introduce that because I've sometimes seen we're not done, we're only done, not a single done yet. So I think we need to do that in one of my teams as well. And so it's a really good tip of you. We get a question in the chat as well. I often hear that we do not need testers. We can make the developers test. How hard can it be? What's your view on that?
I think that it's two parts of that coin. So I think that quality is a shared team responsibility. And it depends a bit what you put in the words testing, I would say. Like, what kind of activities do you think that the word testing reveals? Some of those activities, I think, is very important to be taken care of by someone with the proper mindset. And that also means that you might not be as code biased or as code blinded or blinded by the syntax that you could be if you are a developer. And a tester also, as I mentioned, usually have the T-shaped knowledge. You know a lot about a lot of things, but you are not necessarily knowing the most about things, which also makes you ask the relevant questions. So it's two coins, I would say, for the more kind of deeper testing and for the strategic work. I would say that the tester mindset and a tester brings a lot of value that a developer might not be able to provide to the team. But I also think that it's very important that developers take their parts of some of the testing activities, and that we as testers help to kind of elaborate to them how they can think when they are writing their checks and how they could kind of evolve a mindset of critical thinking towards their own, but also towards other code, I would say. But yes, I think it's really hard.
So you had a lot of really insightful quotes in your presentations too. Do you have any specific book you would recommend the audience to read? Some book that has given you more insights than others?
I think I will recommend some blogs instead, like Develop Sense. I can share the link maybe in the chat later.
Yes, please.
It's a James Bach blog. And every time I read anything there, even if it's 10 years old or more, I always get some new insights. And sometimes it's also mind-provoking, which I like because they challenge my own beliefs. And I like the format as well, because then you can read a post, even if you don't have a full kind of a book amount of time to set apart.
Good approach. We're running over time here, so we'll be switching all for lunch. We'll have a lunch break for an hour. Thank you very much, Jos. I'll be happy to share an applause.
Thank you so much.
It was really nice presentation. Thank you very much. And the rest of you, and hopefully Jos, we'll meet again in an hour. Have a good lunch.